Right. Welcome everyone to the Lofi Podcast. Today I have a special guest with me, Cucamello. Thank you very much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yes, glad to hear that. And so how are you keeping?
Yep, really well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, glad to hear that. So yes, before we get started and looking into the lo-fi scene and things like that, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself? You know, what you do, and do you have any hobbies outside of music?
Yep. So my day job, I work as a data analyst. I work at university. I spend a lot of my time in this room making music. Some of my hobbies are like old computer games. So if anybody's seen me on a lo-fi storage stream or anything, you might have spotted there's a lot of games consoles here, a lot of old consoles. So I spend a lot of time fixing them up, playing those, building things. So I recently posted on Threads that seemed quite popular, but I built this desk, for example. So
yes,
enjoy woodwork.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yes. So actually, I'm quite into old games as well. So is there any particular favorites that you have, or?
Oh, I love the Dreamcast.
Right. Yes.
Not sure why. I just so I've got a big collection behind me, but it's just a console I really enjoy. But the SNES was where it started. So me and my brother, I remember buying it as a kid. Going into the shop, we got it second hand, and we'd saved up money from like grandparents and odd jobs, and we literally poured like a case of 2p's and £1 coins and stuff all over this guy's desk in the shop to buy it. And it's still going strong. So
right, that is amazing. The fact that it's still working, because I myself, the first ever console I remember playing is the Super Nintendo as well. And there were so many great memories made on that piece of kit. Like I remember, like with my cousins playing a Super Mario Kart and Starwing as well. Like those were some great memories.
Yeah, I think I always like to say it was. I think it was my first door. If you count, if anybody remembers Mario Paint, it had a way of making songs in there where it had a stave, and instead of notes, you had like mushrooms and Mario's face, and you could make songs on there. I think that was my first experience, like programming music.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, because that actually ties into the next question I was about to ask you. How did you get into music? I mean, you already answered it a little bit there with Mario Paint, but sort of how did it progress from there?
So I think that was my first door. I learned acoustic as a kid. So I think since I was 4 or 5 years old,
right.
I had an old acoustic, which I still have, that my gran passed down to me. And I learned to play. It was really hard when I first started. So I had classical acoustic guitar lessons. But as a little kid with a full-size acoustic guitar, they are not easy to get your hands around. But I did do that for years, and eventually moved in, and when I became a teenager, got into bands. So I played in sort of punk bands, some metal bands, some emo bands. I was in a touring pop punk band. We played for about 10 years, playing all over the UK. Didn't get particularly far, but we played hundreds and hundreds of gigs. I think that was when I really got into songwriting. With the other guys in the band. We sort of took a hiatus whilst at uni, got back together after, but then lives and jobs meant that eventually ended. And then I think I took a break for about 10 years from seriously making anything really before getting back into it with lo-fi. So yeah.
No, that's really interesting. So because you mentioned genres like punk and emo, and they're very, very different to what lo-fi is.
Yeah.
So how did your musical journey change over time, in that you went from this really hard and heavy music to what is chill and relaxing? Because they're so contrasting. Like over time, what changed?
Yeah, I think there is some sides of it. So I enjoyed things like John Lennon growing up as well. I grew up with metal from my parents. So my mum and dad still go to Download Festival in the UK every single year. They're big metal fans, AC/DC, Black Sabbath. All of that good stuff is what I grew up on. And then I think I discovered like Nirvana first, and then more into the punk side, like Bad Religion and stuff as a kid. And I think as a teenager, punk is sort of how you feel. So it works quite well. I still love to listen to pop punk all the time, and I still occasionally play some pop punk. But I think over years, I think there's some songwriting elements that are like similar to how I approach lo-fi. I know a lot of people approach lo-fi from like a jazz background, um, but I think I still come at it from a pop punk background. But after years off, I needed something I could make myself, and I cannot sing, so pop punk is out the window. But I also had depression and anxiety for a number of years, and I think I started listening to lo-fi as a way to relax. Um, and then I thought I'd like to get back into making music. This is relaxing and calming. It helps with anxiety. I can do this. Let's have a crack, I think.
No, that's fantastic. And I mean, it's really heartwarming to hear how, you benefited from listening to lo-fi and how you're wanting to give back to that community and produce music yourself in it. And so, like, lo-fi itself, it's almost like a small community, all of the producers online. We all have some connection to each other and we're always collaborating. We're always making music with each other. And how do you feel about that? Like, what do you think of lo-fi being sort of a small indie community rather than this big mainstream music?
I think that's something that drew me in to the genre in general. I wasn't aware of the community around it when I first started making it. I think it's when I discovered Discord servers, and I think that's where a lot of us suddenly realized there's this whole community there. It's not just people's faces on Instagram. Discord is a wealth of not just labels, but communities and proper communities where people talk, support each other. The first one I joined was Will Hatton, his server. So Hushchild is his moniker, but he does a really great YouTube channel. Um, and his community has a lot of people and they share things. So it's not just here's some music, let's collaborate. And that's where I discovered a lot of people have similar backgrounds. So I was surprised by how many people come from different music angles, but also have had anxiety, depression, struggled with things. And it's a way of not just connecting through music, but using that music almost as a way to meet people like-minded and then start other conversations. And I think the community around lo-fi is quite different from, say, a punk scene. It's very different. I think there's always communities for that around going to gigs, and everybody turned up to gigs and supported each other, but nobody would talk about their feelings or how their day was going. It was still quite like show offy. Let's have a good time, party hard. Lo-fi is a much more communal. Let's share how we're doing. Let's share our music, but also support each other. Really.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that is one thing I really love myself too. It's just that way we're able to be open to each other and we'll be able to be there for each other and to build each other up, not just as musicians, but just as people as well. I mean, even us right now, we're having a conversation as two people to each other and not simply as just simple musicians. And there's actually, we're real people and we have real lives, and the fact that we're able to talk about that to each other is something that I find absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's something that I think in lo-fi, people often see as like this faceless genre without people behind it. But I don't think I see that at all. There are those people who love to have their like avatars and not put themselves out there. But even behind that, there's still two people probably collaborating, making some music in the evening. And I think that's what's really cool about it.
Yeah, it is absolutely. It's really beautiful to see. But as well as an artist, you do some work with labels as well. You do some managing and you do some A&R. So, like, how do you see that from the other side, being working with the labels and not just an artist? Does it change your outlook on lo-fi in any way at all?
I think it's definitely changed how I approach other labels. So if I'm submitting to a label, there's some little silly things that it's made me do more. So when you're submitting to a label, making sure that you put exactly what it is that they are asking for in those forms, because it takes a lot of time when you have hundreds of releases to go onto Spotify and find out what a URI is. Like, so for Chill Space, I made an explanation for that. You'd be amazed at how people haven't read that, and I still have to go find it. But I think these are things that I don't think people realize from the outside, that this takes a lot of time. So it's not just uploading, there's adding the metadata, getting all the contracts, promotion, organizing the community itself is quite a big thing. It all takes a lot of time. So I think I've got a lot more appreciation for all of the other labels out there and what they do. But I think it's making sure when I'm dealing with other labels now that I am absolutely meticulous with making sure that I give them exactly what it is they're after, make their lives as easy as possible. The last thing I want is somebody going, "Oh, I'm not going to listen to Cucamello's music because he can't even spell that." Next, there's always somebody else submitting.
Yeah. Yeah, it really changes your outlook then, because I don't have any experience from the label side of things. So like even hearing this from you is all entirely new to me. And so even as we speak, this is changing my outlook on how in the future I will be submitting to labels. And I suppose anyone listening to this as well too, it could be entirely new information for them. So this is really helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Make it as easy as possible. I think sometimes labels are seen as like these, again, faceless things with people in mind, but nearly every label that you talk to, apart from a few, are run by other lo-fi artists. There's a load of us who are artists running these labels, A&R. Sometimes we're getting paid. Quite often we're not getting paid anything. And we're doing it because we want to support the community. So remember that there's people behind these as well. There are some labels that aren't like that, I would say. But for the vast majority, there's good people who are trying to help. So make their lives easy.
Yes, absolutely. We always have to be mindful of the people on the other end of the screen as well, too, just what they have to go through. So yes, you've already touched a little bit talking about Chill Space. So, but how have you found working in that label and the community there? And sort of, do you have any opinions on it?
Yeah, I think Chill Space is an interesting one because it's the first label I started working with. And that came from actually just being part of the community. So I've had people submit and ask, how did you become A&R for a label? How did you get involved in all this? And as I was asked, at no point did I contact the labels that I work with and say, can I work with you? They asked me, and they asked me because I was just heavily involved in the community. So Chill Space, I was active on the Discord server. I was submitting music, releasing music through them. When they started doing beat battles quite a while ago, I submitted to all of them. And this is Will Hatton's fault from his server, is I got addicted to just submitting to all of the beat battles I could find for a while. But that meant I submitted to a load of the Chill Space ones, won a bunch of them, came runner up and had releases for the others. And then Christy, who was the owner, wanted some help with some, I think, playlisting at the time. So a bunch of us just made some playlists of things that we were interested in that weren't necessarily lo-fi, just to put it out there. So I made a pop punk one. So some with no promotion, got a few hundred followers. People into sad songs with happy tunes is what I called it. But then after doing that for a while, Christy asked if I would be involved, and then and it's a great community. I think it's really good to be able to support people that I got to know as an artist. I got to know them, and now I can help support them from the other side.
Yeah, it really goes back to what we were just talking about a minute ago. It's actually getting to know the other people in the lo-fi community as people and working with them. It's just over time, you're more active, they get to know who you are, and through that, you're forming connections and bonds with each other. And so, yeah, that's really good to see. But as well as Chill Space, you help out with things at Lo-Fi Stories as well, I believe.
Yep. So I'm a community manager there. So for them, it's less of the A&R side. So no uploading of your songs. But we organise events in the community. So we've tried to do a live stream once or twice a month. So me, David, and Julia, who run the label, um, chat with people. So we've done some where we once a month we'll listen through independent releases. So it's a way as a label. Lo-Fi Stories has got a very strong ethic around wanting to give back to the community, support artists, and do it in a very artist-focused way. That's why we have Anya doing some incredible art, but it's why we also have open submission. So if you've released with us, you can submit your independent releases and we'll listen through them once a month. We'll do a live stream, give feedback, chat with people, and then add them to our playlists. So not just to the Local Stories playlists, but to our own playlists. Try and encourage everybody in the chat to do the same. And we recently just did the first compilation, which I helped arrange, which was a lot of fun. Tried to flip the head and get artists to, instead of being inspired, writing a song and then getting someone to make art based on that, to do the other way around. So Anya came up with a beautiful animation of a cozy room, and we asked artists to be inspired by that image and then write the song. And I think that's gone really well. And we're trying to do it in a much more communal way. So Julia, for example, does a lot of work in pitching to radio. So you'll see Lo-Fi Stories artists appearing on radio, mostly in the US and the UK. And this is all stuff that we do just to try and support other artists.
Yeah, no, it's good to see that, and how the labels are also working with the artists and wanting to support them and help them grow as producers and musicians. And the musicians make things for the labels, but at the same time, some labels don't really give much back. And to see
Yeah.
that you're putting such an effort into that is something that is really good to see.
Yeah, I think it is different when you see labels run by artists. So at Chill Space we've got me and Saint Rumi, both artists. So we want to support, and we've between us we've probably collaborated with everybody who's released with Chill Space at some point. But then yeah, Julia and David at Lo-Fi Stories as well. We've all had good and bad experiences with labels. Um, but we know what it's like to be as an artist, so we want to support you as an artist as much as we would want to be supported, and we try our best.
Yes, well, thank you so much for all of the effort that you've put into it. And so, for any artists who would be wanting to get more part of a lo-fi community, do you have any recommendations or tips on how they can do so, like how they can get more involved in different things?
Yeah, I'd say there's a lot of them, so don't be put off, and I say don't try and join. Well, I'd say join all of them, but don't think that you can be fully active on every single server there is under the sun. That nobody can do that. There's far too many. But I think a lot of people are quite shy, introverted in the community. I'd consider myself quite introverted in real life, really. But I think when you join these servers, see what the vibe is and see if you gel with it first, because there's no point just jumping in guns blazing. I see some people do that and then just disappear because it's not the vibe for you, and that's fine. um, I think different communities have different vibes, different interests, different demographics of people, and you may not connect. So find one that you connect with and then talk to people. I think the number one red flag is don't just spam those links. Don't just join a Discord and spam yo, I'm the hot new stuff. Listen here. We're just none of us want to see that. But start talking. Find one that you resonate with, speaks to you, has your type of people, and then if they've got events, join them. I think a lot of people don't like doing their first beat battle, for example. But I'd say from doing mine, the first time I did it, I was so nervous. I was like, "This is hot garbage. Nobody's going to want to listen to this." Um,
Yes.
but I got really great feedback on it. That's when I saw how supportive the community was. People will give you feedback that's useful, actionable, or just big you up, because there's quite a lot of just friendly people who are just sing your praises, even if it's trash. That's fine. That's great. We all need that sometimes. Um, so enter. Don't be worried that you're not going to win, because quite often one person wins. we've had some recently where we've had some massive names joining. They haven't won either.
Okay.
So
Yes.
we recently had one where we had some artists with hundreds and thousands of monthly listeners, and a really small new artist won one. Um, because lots of these are picked on personal preference. It's not whether we all have different tastes. So just, yeah, have a go, start talking to people, and just be nice. I
Mhm.
think.
Yeah, no, because I suppose a lot of the people who make music, well, I wouldn't say a lot, but some of them, as you say, are introverted. And so it's getting over that initial fear of thinking of what other people think about what you make and to just put it out there. And to accept any genuine constructive criticism to help you grow as a producer and an artist. And
Yeah.
in that way, we're always helping each other. So, yes. So, now moving a little bit away from lo-fi now and just going back to you yourself personally. You did talk about it earlier, but now you produce lo-fi, but I'm assuming you don't always listen to lo-fi as well. Do you listen to any other genres of music to inspire you in your creativity?
Yeah. So this is something that's also come from the community. So I listen to a lot of lo-fi, obviously, and still do it to relax and to meditate. Listen to a lot of pop punk, punk rock. I think that's probably the biggest thing that I listen to. But having talked to other people in the community, I've been introduced to genres that I maybe haven't listened to much. There's a lot of hip hop that I never listened to growing up. My wife introduced me to a lot of rap, but there's a lot of hip hop, boom bap, all of that stuff that I've been introduced to by the community that I now love and listen to regularly because people have suggested to it. Um, Thanks to Saint Rumi, I've actually started listening to some jazz, some. Uh, I think it's talking to different people and getting these different takes. I did discover the other day that a lot of people seem to absolutely be shocked that I haven't listened to a whole Radiohead album, but I just not for me, not for
Mhm.
me.
Yeah, I
Uh,
suppose everyone has their own tastes and there's things that they won't like. So,
yeah,
yeah.
but
Mhm.
at the moment though, it's wall to wall Christmas.
Mhm. Yes, I suppose that is the season at the moment.
Yeah.
So, yes. So, but listening to all these different genres, do you find that it inspires you and that you can incorporate some of the elements in some way or another into what you produce as an artist?
Yeah,
Does it inspire you? In
100% it does. I think there's different licks you can learn from listening to different styles, even just little flourishes. So like a little jazz flourish that you could add to something that generally is quite like straight by the numbers. You could add that little element that elevates your track a little bit. Also, I like to start tracks in different ways. I know people, you get stuck in like, okay, here's a 4 bar loop of chords. I'll add a melody and then just go through the rhythm. I like to start with maybe a different instrument. So either do drums first or guitar first or bass first, um, and try to mix it up that way. And recently I was like, why aren't I using years and years of playing in a punk band in lo-fi as much as I could? So I wrote a bunch of lo-fi songs in drop D, um, because that was an interesting way of just starting a song. Um, so Light the Fire that just came out with Lo-Fi Stories was just written in drop D,
yeah.
um, because I felt like I wanted to try doing something differently that day. And I think that came out great. I'm really
Yeah.
happy with that track.
Mhm.
Really happy with how it came out. Um, and I think it's, for me, it's less listening to a song and trying to recreate it, but just thinking of oh, that's a different starting point. I can
Mhm.
start there, and that will lead me somewhere else that I wouldn't normally go.
Mhm. Yeah, it's trying something different and then just following the process and seeing where it leads you in just this whole realm of creativity because there's so many branches the path could take. And so it's great to see how we can all incorporate our own unique style to what we produce. And so that way, everything that we make is personal and it's real and it has our own sort of human touch to it.
Yeah,
But now, with technology and things like that, we have the issue of AI generated music.
yeah.
And so, how do you feel about how this is going forward? I know that there's been some controversy going around with people producing AI generated lo-fi and putting it out and things like that. And what is your opinion on the whole situation?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one. I think we don't know yet where it's going to go, when it will become a tool. I do think, as much as I don't like it, I think at some point it will be a tool similar to sampling. Um, but I think there's a long way for it to go before it gets accepted in that way and can be used in that way. So what I'm seeing from a label side now is we are seeing people submitting tracks, trying to pass them off as if they're human, and that's a red line that I just cannot cross. I think if there's going to be AI generated music, which I think there will be, whether we like it or not, I think it needs to be clearly labeled as such. So as a user, as a label, I know that is AI, that is not a human. I can then make an informed decision whether I want to engage with that. Personally, I don't think music or art, if made by AI, is actually art. I think art itself is a human expression. So even if you can't, you can barely draw, if you pick up a pencil and put it on the paper, that is human made art. All of your lived experiences are coming out in how you do that. And that is what makes something not just a piece of paper with some pencil on it. That's what turns it into art. It's that human lived experience. And it's the same with music, is that you don't just take what you've learned and how you've done it. It's all those micro decisions you make along the way. So we could make 100 songs, each of us, with just four chords and the same four chords, but we could get 100 different ways. And it's not just where you end up, it's all the why you made those decisions along the way based on your personal tastes, your preferences, something you've learned or listened to. And I think that's what makes music and art. And I don't think AI is that. Um, I don't know. Do you agree?
I entirely agree with everything you just said. And it's very profound what you've said, that everything that we've experienced up until now comes out in the art that we produce. I mean, every small experience and every decision we've made is what makes our art
Yeah,
ours and personal. And whereas whenever AI produces music, it's simply just zeros and ones. And all it is taking off what has already been made by real people. It's been analyzed, and then it mixes itself up into, well, what the AI thinks that something should sound like.
yeah,
And so there's no human input in it. It's all very lifeless. It's just sound. There is
yeah.
no emotion or love put into what was produced. And so I
That's
can,
that's that's exactly what I think. And I think there is going to be a point. So at the moment, we're in a weird legal hole. And I think a lot of the people who are submitting these songs to labels don't realize the legal implications that they're putting themselves in. So, for example, if you use the free version of Suno to create your beat and submit that to a label, well, you've just broken the contract already. And some labels have clauses where they can come after you for reparations for that. So Suno for itself has been trained, we all know, on the legally gathered material. They don't own the copyright to that. What I do think at the end of the day is the big labels are going to sue them out of business, and they're going to create their own. They're going to create their own AI generating with catalogs that they own. I don't like that, but that will at least be them using their legal copyright to make legal AI music. Um, but I think if you submit that then to a label, you not only don't own it, they can't publish it. They can't say it. It's the same as if you say you've got an uncleared sample, it's not yours to give. And even if you pay for things like Suno, if you've then paid for it, they own it. It says in their terms and conditions that they own the music. So you still can't submit it to a label because labels say that you have to fully own the rights to that music. So even if you ethically don't care about AI, you legally still can't do it and you're going to get into trouble. Um, but what I do think will happen is the big labels will create these models. It's going to happen. And I think what we'll get to down the road is that people will creatively sample that. So you don't want to dig for records because you're worried about copyright, fine. There's things like Tracklib where you can pay and you can get access to tracks and chop them up how you want, and that's perfectly legal. I think AI will go that way where people will then, okay, create it and then you creatively chop it. And I think that's going to end up being some form of accepted, but it's how much you chop it. Just typing in lo-fi beat is not, it's not creative.
No, not at all. Yes, right. No, it's very interesting what you just mentioned there about the whole legality of things. Because whenever I was starting off, as I went at the beginning of my sort of lo-fi journey, and I released tracks with labels, I didn't really understand the whole gravity of these contracts that I was signing. And
None of us do.
yeah, and then as time went on, I realized that these are actual legal documents, something that I need to take a lot more seriously than I did.
Yeah.
And so, for some younger or just starting off lo-fi producers, do you have anything that or wisdom that you could tell them, being more experienced in the field, to do with contracts?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you should talk to your peers, who they've worked with and how they've worked with. I think, and I say this a lot on servers that I'm on, is that I shouldn't actually be giving you the advice because I am biased because I work as a label. And I think it's good to remember that is don't just ask a label for their opinion. So if there's a contract, first read it, read all of it. Most of these lo-fi label contracts are particularly long. There's going to be standard things in them that you need to be aware of. So your publishing rights. So a lot of lo-fi labels won't take your publishing, but some will, and that's a big deal because it can be a nice tidy sum of money if you register all of your tracks, which you should all do with a PRO publisher. Um, so see if that's been taken out. What are your splits? And what are their rights with it? How can they use your music? Can they use it for sync? Do you get a cut of that? If not, well, you should be signing that contract. You should be getting a cut of all of this stuff. Um, for a lot of lo-fi labels, I say is pretty standard that you'll get like an equal cut for sync, publishing, all of that, or publishing even not included. But you need to check the terms and conditions. Check you're happy with it. I think it is quite a transactional thing. So just because a label says so and so records, so what? What are they giving you back? So if you're giving up 50% of the royalties to your song, are they doing 50% more effort? Are they giving you something that you want back? And make sure that they do. And the best way to do that, as I said, is to talk to other producers. So if you solely want loads of plays, you don't care about any of the other stuff, you can probably find a label for that by talking to other artists. There will be other labels that maybe don't get you as many plays, but you'll have a nicer experience. If you want custom art, not AI art, certain labels will do that, other labels don't. And I think the best way is to talk to others in the community, talk to producers who've released with these labels and get their experience, because there are some that are truly dreadful. And I wouldn't ever release with again. We've all been there. We've all had those experiences. There's a lot of labels who just want to upload your music, hope that you get an editorial, and that's it. They don't have any playlists. They don't have any support. I think a few years ago that used to work. There was lots more editorials. We all saw editorials drop off a cliff a couple of years ago. People aren't getting them as much unless they have contacts. But see what a label can offer you. Remember, it's not just you with them. They have to offer you something in return. So make sure that what they have to offer is something you want, and that it's a fair deal for what you feel that you require.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely fantastic. It's really valuable information you've just shared there. So thank you very much for saying it. But yes, first and foremost, we need to make sure that what we submit to the labels is not AI generated.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes. So lo-fi as a genre, of late, I kind of see that it's shifting slightly in its musical style. I don't know if you see it yourself, but I find that a lot of the tracks used to have a very, what's the way to put it? They all had sort of a pattern that they followed, and they all were very similar. But now I feel that some artists are trying to expand it,
Yeah.
and bring in other styles into lo-fi. Have you noticed that yourself?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that I've seen. I think you see it a lot from the bigger names, especially from the lo-fi girl artists. And I think that there's almost a maturity in lo-fi in the they've done it long enough that maybe they're bored. They're trying new things. So I think we're seeing more complex song structures. I think drums are still very similar, but we're seeing people adding more elements from different genres in there. And I'm seeing a lot more almost, I think sleepy is still the big one. That's where everybody loves to make it. We all love sleepy lo-fi. Um, but I think it is quite saturated. There's a lot of us making it. There's a lot of labels releasing it. I'm seeing a lot more jazzy stuff these days. So there's a lot of labels focusing on jazz, but then I'm also seeing labels have sort of imprints. So there's like liminal lo-fi now, and sort of a lot of shift. I've seen a lot of people shifting towards the ambient side, but then that in itself is also influencing back into the more straight sleepy lo-fi. So we're seeing a lot more like ethereal ambient pads in everything at the moment, which beautiful. But I do think there's these almost these subgenres that shoot off and then influence back themselves. I don't know what if you've seen it, 'cause I think jazz, liminal, and sort of the ambient are the big ones I've seen.
Yeah, those are the three as well that I've noticed too. But it's really good to see these artists grow and develop. They're starting to experiment with other instruments, other styles, and just as a producer, they're becoming, what's the word? They're just simply growing into better versions of themselves. And then they influence each other, and because lo-fi is a community, everybody is building on top of what is happening, and then it just expands and it continues to grow just exponentially.
Yeah, I think a lot of this genre started with people showing off to each other almost. It's less about the sort of our mass listeners, because a lot of lo-fi is from playlists, but it's a lot of lo-fi artists being like, oh, you've made a nice liminal track. Well, I'm going to make the most liminal track you've ever heard. Oh, well, I'm going to use that, but I'm going to add the most boom bap drums you've ever heard, and then make a study beat with it. And I think there's a lot of that goes on, which is great to see.
Mhm. Yeah, and then just that way, it's such an amazing community. But yes, Cucamello, thank you so much for your time today having this interview. Before we wrap up, would it be all right if I could ask, are you open for collaborations with people? And if so, where can they find you?
Yep. So at the moment, I'm open for collaborations, but I do tend to say no if I've not spoken to you before. So
Right.
join those communities, get
Mhm.
engaged, be active, talk to me first, and
Mhm.
then send me that DM that says, "Hey, bro, here's a 4-bar loop," and
Yes.
then maybe I'll respond. You can find all my details at
Mhm.
cucamello.com,
Mhm.
or it's at Cucamello Music on all the socials. It's
Yes.
been
No.
great talking to you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. It just all goes back to what you said. We need to start off building connections with each other as people first and get to know each other as the human beings we are. And through that,
100%.
we can
Mm.
make beautiful music together. So thank you so much. I hope you
Thank
have a
you.
great evening. Yes.
Yes,
So,
thank you. You too.
okay, I'll talk to you later. All the best.
Thank you. Bye. Mhm.